Hope you're well and safe. Here with another video about optimism. And last time I started getting into some of the practical coaching applications, and I wanted to get into another big category. Again, if you aren't caught up, watch the videos that come before this where I sort of set the groundwork of how optimism works. But one thing that I think coaches run into all the time, especially youth sports coaches, is that they get feedback that sort of them trying to regulate behavior on their team is not a very positive way to coach. And I want to really push back on that because I actually think they're conflating two things when they do that. First off, I do think that it's a fair criticism of coaching writ large that there's not a lot of empathy in the profession. And that is kind of an endemic problem because it's been handed down from generation to generation. Most of our coaching knowledge goes that way. So many of us that coach were athletes once. We were treated with very little empathy, and that's how we know how to coach. Okay, so I do believe there is a huge value in coaches improving their empathy, and I think it's only going to become more important. In fact, I wrote in a blog post once that I think we're probably 20 years away from coaches being fired for lack of empathy. And I'm 100% serious about that. That's not a joke, although it may sound like it to some of you. So the difference here is that empathy has nothing to do with whether or not you permit certain behaviors, okay? If you're a leader in any organization, you have to regulate behavior for the greater good. You have to be able to say where the boundary lines are and where, like basically what's right and wrong on your team. And saying that has nothing to do with being positive or negative, or regulating it really has nothing to do. Now, where does empathy come into it? Empathy is the ability to in terms of when we're looking at behaviors, is to be able to understand why somebody is behaving the way they do. And oftentimes that has to do with figuring out what is going on with them emotionally, right? And so if you introduce the concept of optimism on your team and you start building a conversation around what are the emotions that people on my team are experiencing and what do they do, how do they explain that to themselves afterwards, and even like what kind of actions can it lead to, then you're going to be able to much easier have that conversation versus what I see a lot of, and it's also a product of people just being overwhelmed, is they go, I don't like this behavior, I'm going to punish it, right? And I'm not coming out like blanket against punishment. I just think punishment in of itself can help you to correct a specific behavior. So to use a very, very extreme example, a lot of the psychological research they've done into spanking. Okay, if a parent spanks their child for doing one thing or another, they will be able to reduce the incidence of that behavior. However, overall behavior for the kid will not improve, right? So every time you have to punish, it's not without cost, right? To you as a coach, you have to be able to get in and have a lot of other tools to change behavior on your team, and one of them can be optimism, empathy, just understanding what's going on, saying, hey, is this why you did that? Okay, and having somebody be able to have that conversation with you, and at the same time saying it's totally unacceptable to do what you did, right? And that is, I think, the real dance to both address being a coach and being an optimistic and a positive coach, but being tough and having high expectations on behavior. So next time, we're going to get into just one more section of coaching applications. I hope so far these little 5-minute videos have been helpful to you. It's been helpful to me in this time. to be able to share them with you. And see you soon.